Okay, hey everybody, welcome to the Power Selling Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Crawford, the Power Selling Mom, and today I'm really honored to be joined by someone that I've known for a long time and worked with. Wayne Jordan is a retired auctioneer, antique dealer, writer, editor, and involved heavily in antiques and in antique tourism. So he's an advocate for antique tourism. We've been colleagues for many years, and we've done over 80 episodes of a podcast that we used to do together called Flip It or Skip It, which is still available on all your major podcast players. We had a wonderful run. We had a great run with that, and we had moved on to other opportunities in our world, and that's what's so wonderful about both of us being entrepreneurs. We can move on to new adventures, and that's what we're doing today.
That's right. New adventures, new opportunities. Or as my wife says, can't you keep a job?
Well said. I like that, Wayne. So tell us where you're at today. Bring us up to date.
Of course, I've been in the antiques business, dealing with antiques for 40 some years. And about a dozen years ago or so, I write for Antique Trader. And about a dozen years or so ago, I did an article for them titled Antiques Tourism, and that article is still around. I mean, you use the keyword antiques tourism, and I've been there on page one of Google for years for a couple of reasons. One is that not many people are writing about that, but it stays up there. It keeps getting hits. I've teamed up with the Main Street America program here in my hometown. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's Main Street America has been around for about 20 years, and they provide matching grants to small towns like the one I live in to help revitalize their downtown area and their town. It takes a couple of years to get approved to even be in the program, so we're in the planning stages of that. And I've also hooked up locally with the tourism department here in town and in the local region. And I've just become really enthused about the whole idea of tourism. As you know, for a time I was an auctioneer, an art auctioneer on cruise ships. I love traveling. My wife and I have traveled a lot. She's a former flight attendant. So we've gotten around. And I love to travel. I love antiques, and it just made sense to try to put the two together. So I put together a blog. There's not much to it right now because, in fact, we haven't even launched. It'll be launched in a couple of weeks. But the blog is antiquestourism.com. And on that, I talk about antiques towns and places and principles of antiques tourism, and I talk about cultural and heritage tourism. And the plan going forward is to talk about cruises and train trips, motor coach tours. For example, Antique Trader hired me to do a series of articles on antiques tourism. And I just finished writing one and interviewing a woman who goes by the moniker the Antiques Diva. And nice. She's been around for a while. And currently she lives in Venice, Italy, but she does customized one-on-one tours with antiques dealers and hoteliers and interior designers. And she takes them all over Europe. She's in about 15 different countries. She does some things in the United States too, but she's lived in Paris and Amsterdam and London and Berlin. She just has a whole network over there of dealers and antiques people. In fact, this week, I just got an email from her, a text, about an hour ago. She's on her way from Italy to the High Point, North Carolina Furniture Show, where she'll be speaking. She's got her own line of furniture. I mean, it's quite a story. The article I'm writing probably won't be published for another month, but you keep your eyes out for it. It's a really interesting story. But she's an Oklahoma girl. She's from Oklahoma, and she told an interesting story that I'll share with you.
Yes.
When she was a girl, she said she was fascinated by the response of fire ants to flooding. You know, they have fire ants in Texas and Oklahoma. It's an invasive species. And what happens when they get these sudden flash floods in that part of the country is the fire ants link their limbs together, legs, arms, whatever the scientific name is for them.
Okay.
But they link them together in a great big mass, and in between the legs and all that there are air pockets. The air pockets provide buoyancy and holds them up. They can move in just enormous masses of ants across the water. Boy, can you tell I'm a DC boy? Water. And she's fascinated by that. And she compares that to antique dealers in that it's important for antiques dealers to support one another, to link up, to stay close, to promote their businesses together, to form associations in their local towns and to work together. And she's a big supporter of that, and that's one of her main focuses. And as soon as she started telling me her story and talking about fire ants and these sorts of things, I was sold, because I'm right there where she is. I just don't say it as eloquently as she said it.
That is a fascinating story. What a fascinating person. What fun to write about her.
Yes, it is. Yes. And there will be more articles to come. The first one I wrote was on Frederick, Maryland. They participated in the Great American Main Street program. Theirs was like a lot of towns, like the town I live in. It's an old factory town, blue collar, too many empty storefronts, that sort of thing. But they've been working their program for 13 years or so. It's not uncommon for people to just, keep with it for years. And they have a beautiful downtown area. They have about a dozen antique shops that you can close enough to walk one to the other, a couple of big antique malls. It's just a nice, it's a nice little town. And antiques tourism is rooted in what's known as cultural and heritage tourism. And cultural tourism is, as the name implies, it's about the culture, the arts, the overall aesthetic of the town. And heritage is the place, the history, the museums, that kind of thing. And what's fascinating to me is that worldwide, tourism is huge. It's one of the biggest industries in the world. I mean, you have the big corporations like airlines and hotel chains and that sort of thing. But you also have a lot of smaller players. You have the individual towns and their tourism departments and travel agents. There's just a whole network of smaller entities going on there. And cultural and heritage tourism, out of this trillions of dollar industry, takes up about half of it. About half of the people traveling are traveling for cultural heritage reasons.
Wow.
They want, think about it. They want more than, when they leave town, they want to see something different. And if you're going down the highway and all you see are from one town to another, the same fast food restaurants, the same auto service change, there's a sameness about all of it. And that's why people leave home. So they want something authentic. They want to go to a town and eat the local food and hear the local music and hear stories from the local people. That's what people are craving these days, especially after being locked up in their houses for 2-3 years with COVID.
Yes.
So I love it. I love the concept. I love being involved in it. I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, and it's just so fascinating, and you keep learning. As I always say, if you stop learning, you die. So you keep learning, and you keep enjoying the heritage,
Right.
the local, the interesting facts that are next door that you didn't know about.
Right. Here's a couple of interesting points about the antiques section of cultural heritage tourism. Now, antiques can cross to culture and heritage, but they're mostly in the heritage realm. In antiques tourism, there are primary trip generators and secondary trip generators. Let's talk about the primary.
Yeah.
Now, you go to various shows throughout the year, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
What was the last one you went to?
Brimfield.
Okay, good. Good example, Brimfield. Now, when you went to Brimfield, tell me about your expenditures. From start to finish, what did you pay to go to Brimfield, get your inventory or whatever, ship it, and come back home? Start to finish.
Yeah, so you have to book your airline ticket, your hotel ticket, and you try to get as close to the event as possible.
Right.
And in areas like Brimfield, it's not so easy unless you want to stay at a motel. So so you don't have the fancy luxuries, but I didn't mind spending one night at a motel and enjoyed the culture of the local. And what I also enjoyed was going to a local restaurant, mom and pop, for breakfast that had a Boy Scout troop selling popcorn.
Wow.
And it was really fun, and it was cheap. The breakfast was cheap. So that was the kickstart of setting you up for that culture of that hometown feeling of the local, vibe.
Right.
And then going to Brimfield is awesome. I absolutely love Brimfield.
Right.
It's got to be my favorite place to hunt for antiques and treasures. And I did drop $400 on a stereo while I was there.
Really?
And yeah,
We'll have to talk another time about that. That's right up my alley.
I know.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy because I just got it running, and it's got disco lights, and it's a turntable, and it also has an 8-track tape player, and it all works. So
Wonderful.
I'm so excited. So I did pay about $600 to ship it home. So that was a bit of an expense. Paid $400.
In addition to the 400?
Yes.
Well, that's a pretty hefty investment, Dana. So I think you're going to have to change your moniker. No more power selling mom stuff. You got to be Disco Dana.
Yeah, I just had to have it. I had to have it. So
I understand.
yeah, it was something I wanted.
So you had to make travel arrangements. Did you rent a car?
I did rent a car.
Okay, you rented a car. You found lodging. You got to the show. You spent $400. You spent another $600 on shipping. What'd you eat when you were at the show?
The local pilgrim food.
Pilgrim sandwiches, right?
Yeah.
Turkey and
The
dressing
best.
and
Couldn't
cranberry
wait.
sauce. One of my favorites.
Yes.
So, and that illustrates the point I was making about a primary trip
Yeah.
looking for antiques. You made a decision to go to Brimfield. So Brimfield was on your radar. But there are towns all over America that are known for their antiques district, like Adamstown, Pennsylvania, in Lancaster County in Amish country.
Sure.
Where you see the horse and buggies.
Love that.
Yeah, and they've got, well, the tourism website says that they have 5,000 antique dealers. I'd have to see it to believe it. I know that they have a lot. They have not just antique stores, but they have flea markets and weekend vendors, and so maybe overall they might have 5,000 people involved in it, but you can't go there and shop 5,000 stores. But it's still worth going to, and a lot of people do. And big markets everywhere. You have Long Beach and Round Top, and the list goes on. The destinations that people go to for antiques. But there's also all of the ancillary money that they spend. And the breakdown that I've seen is that for every dollar someone spends on antiques, on the reason they went, for every dollar, they spend $4 on other things. Now, you spent $400, but you spent $600 on shipping. You bought airline tickets, round trip. You had hotels. You had food. I think for that particular trip for you, you probably spent more in ancillary expenses than you did in primary, right?
Sure.
Okay. The other thing with antiques is that it could be a secondary revenue source, a secondary trip generator, and that people will get to a town to see other things. Like, for example, last summer, my wife and I went to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's place outside of Charlottesville, Virginia.
Nice.
And it was nice and it was historic, and we just, walked around till we were completely worn out. It's a lovely place. I highly recommend it. But often people will go to a place like that and not want to leave. They've seen the attraction that they went there to see, but they want more. And for cultural heritage travelers, antiques is high on the list. They'll see an antique store or an antiques district or an antiques mall, and they'll want to go. They'll spend another day. So they will extend their stay for antiques. So they'll go there in the first place for the antiques, or they'll extend their stay for the antiques. But either way, for cultural heritage tourism, antiques play a big role.
Wow. One thing I didn't mention is not only do I enjoy the finding unique things that I may want to keep, but I like the challenge of trying to find something to flip to help pay for my trip. So that's another angle that I do when I go to things like that.
Right.
So I did find a couple of lamps and a valuable clock that I haven't listed them yet because I am enjoying their presence in my home, but I do plan on selling them, and they will add up to enough to pay for my trip.
Right. And that's the way it is often for dealers. I've considered that if I wanted to get a motor coach or an RV and hit the road, and that I could probably pay for everything by picking antiques. Yeah. But I don't want to work that hard anymore. I'm retired. Let someone else do that. Yeah. I don't do too much buying and selling anymore. I do if I'm out and I see something that I think is just killer, and the price is right, and it will be a good investment, or I'll be able to get my usual markup when I flip it, then I may go ahead and buy it. But I'm not out beating the bushes for inventory and listing, 1,000 items in an eBay store and using multi-platform outfits like List Perfectly so I can be sure to hit all the, I always figured that when I got to this age, I'd be rich and handsome. But I'll let you guess which one.
Yeah, one out of two ain't bad.
That's right, 1 out of 2. Well, or none out of 2. So
No, but I think that tourism is so fascinating, and I went to airline travels college, and I love to travel too, and I love the experience, like you said, of and absorbing it all.
Right.
I had a guest on the other day that does motor coach tours to thrift stores,
Oh, wow.
and yeah.
Let me write this down. This sounds like the seed of an article here.
Yes, she was fascinating to speak with. Patty Clark, and she's on an episode here at Power Selling Podcast. And she does motor coach tours from Ocala, Florida to Naples, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And she's planning on doing more, but she has a bus with 50 people and fills it every Thursday. And it's amazing. But my point is, there's a thrift store. You go to a thrift store, a lot of my friends are resellers and thrifters, and you don't expect to see antiques. I'm amazed at how many there are, because a lot of times the thrift stores don't know what they are. However, sometimes they overprice them because they're antique. Because I went into a thrift store in Fort Myers, just like I think it was St. John's Hope or something, and went in there thinking I'm going to look for clothes to flip on eBay. And here there were cases and cases of antique porcelain dolls, corkscrew things, and just all kinds of true antiques. And I was amazed at, here we are at a little thrift store I never dreamed. And then I even asked them, I said, is this a consignment store? Because it seemed so well put together, but it wasn't. It was their for charity shop. So you never know. So the thrift stores may have sections on antiques.
Right. Well, antiques kind of get a bum rap these days because you say antique and you think, old and dusty and brown furniture and mold and, you know the deal. But I've always been an antiques guy. I prefer antiques.
Yep.
Collectibles don't do much for me. They're here today, gone tomorrow. Most of them get wrapped up in a bubble that eventually bursts, and I'm just not, into NFTs and trading cards and that kind of thing.
Right.
But give me a nice, well put together piece of furniture or handcrafted porcelain or glass or something like that, and I'm over the moon. I love to see that kind of stuff. And you can still find things like that around because people aren't used to looking for it anymore. They don't know what it looks like. The knockoffs are so commonplace and so good these days that you really have to know how to approach glassware or something, what it smells like and how it feels in your hand and how translucent is it. And you have to use your senses to do that. And that's why I like antique stores. We've talked about this before. I owned a couple of stores, and we sold musical instruments and music-related antiques and collectibles. We had a big restoration shop. We did antiques and pianos, and our work was in governor's mansions and museums, and that was my thing in those days when I was young enough to work that hard. And the thing that's nice about stores is you can go in and pick things up and touch it and feel it and turn it around in your hands and feel the heft of it. And that's something that you can never do in online selling.
That's right.
You also can't interact with customers as well. And customer interaction, customer care when someone walks into your store, that's getting to be a lost art. I wrote once, I heard there was a time when I was in a a department store. This was a few years back when department stores were a thing. You go to the mall and you go to a department store. And there was a woman walking around with, in the men's department, which is where I was, mother holding the 4-year-old's hand. And the sales clerk came up and said, "Can I help you?" And the little boy said, "No, we're just looking." And it just floored me. I mean, 4 years old, and his mother's got him trained. I mean, he just did this because he's heard her say it.
Yeah, of course.
And so I didn't know what to be shocked the most about, that came out of the mouth of a 4-year-old, or the fact that the clerk said, "Oh, okay," and turned around and left. And I see that all the time. I was at a big Hillsville, Virginia has a huge flea market on Labor Day. And people come from far away as Texas, and it's a big dealer show. It's huge, and there was a very nice antiques display. It was a tented area. They had artificial turf over the ground. They had it was all well merchandised. They had everything tagged. And my wife and I walked in, looking around and, kind of seeing if anything caught my eye. Crickets from the husband and wife that were sitting there watching us walk around. And I picked up a tag and looked at it. And the first thing he said to me, my first contact with that dealer, was, "Those prices are negotiable."
Yeah.
So right away, what's he telling me? First of all, he ignored me when I came in. Secondly, he said his prices are a fantasy, because that's not what he's going to get for it. And he never got up out of his chair. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot in retail stores these days because people don't know the process. And antiques dealers, folks with an antique store, have such a great edge. When people go into an antique store, most of them are going in to browse. Some of them may be collectors looking for particular things, but most of the folks going in are there to browse. Those are your very best people to try to make a sale to, because they're not looking for something specific. If they come in, they say, "Oh, do you have a Framistan off of a Gibson guitar?" and you say no, they're out the door. Mm-hmm. But if someone comes in, what I do is I greet them when they come through the door. "Hi, thanks for coming by. Take your time, look around. I'll be with you in a minute." That's even if I'm doing nothing. Mm-hmm. I'll be with them in a minute. And I give them a chance to walk around. And I notice what it is they pick up and what gets their attention and that sort of thing. And then once they've settled on something, then I'll approach them with, "Gee, that's nice. Did you used to have one of those when you were a kid?" "Oh yeah, we took this down to the stream and we would float these things on the water and shoot at them with our BB guns, and my friend shot his eye out." But
start a
let them settle
conversation.
and start a conversation with them, because if you don't do that, if they pick up something and say, "What's the best you can do on this?"
Right.
Instantly, you're in a dicker. Nobody wins a dicker. A dicker becomes about price. And that's what I don't like about online selling. I mean, I do it, but it's all about price. I mean, you can write descriptions till you've written War and Peace. It's still got to come down to price. But in an antique store, you can draw someone out, get them reminiscing, bring nostalgia into the picture, because people don't buy logically, they buy emotionally. They buy emotionally, they justify logically. So if they're holding this thing in their hand and they're telling you the story about it and that kind of thing, you can just capitalize on it. He says something and you repeat it back to him. And he just keeps on going until he is not going to go home without that thing, because it means so much to him. Sure. And then there will always be a negotiation on price, but then it becomes a matter of value. Not price, but value, the value to him. Why does he value it? Why does he want it? And what's it worth to him? For example, when I was a kid, I was a huge baseball fan. I mean, this goes back to Washington Senators Day. I grew up in D.C., and I went to the old Griffith Stadium before the new stadium was built. I mean, we're talking 1950s. And so I like baseball. I especially like the Senators, and I'm not a card collector. But if I came across, say, a Camilo Pascual, who was a Senators pitcher, if I saw a card like that, I might be willing to pay $50, $60 for it, because and that guy, Camilo Pascual, as a pitcher, only ever hit one home run in his career. And he hit it into the left field bleachers, and I was in the left field bleachers with my best friend when that ball hit and my friend got it.
Oh,
So if I saw that card, that's valuable to me because there's a
sure.
story that goes along with it. Now, if the dealer thought, well, maybe this card's worth $20, I'd pay him $20 in a heartbeat, but he could have gotten 60 if he'd talked to me about it. You know what I mean?
see.
And that's why it takes some interaction. You got to uncover their values, why they want something. And you can only do that in an antique store, in a one-to-one situation. You could do that in a show, of course, but shows, you've got so many people to deal with.
Yeah.
It's a completely different process there. But this is what I like about antique shows, and I am a sucker for a good salesman and a good antique dealer. Because if he starts saying what I would have said, he's got me. I'm done.
I love that. That's, it's something that sellers probably overlook, as part of their marketing plan, because you just think about the sale and the money, and you don't think about the interaction.
Right. Well, consider for a minute that that's why we call it shopping, is we're going around looking and comparing, and that's shopping. If we weren't out looking and comparing, we'd be buying. So we're shopping, and that's different. It's a different level of satisfaction for people. How many people do you know that refer to shopping as retail therapy? That's why it's therapeutic.
Yeah, a lot. Because it is therapeutic.
Right.
And that's why a lot of these people go on this bus trip too, because they get to mingle with people, and they get to shop, and some of them have no direction. They just want to go look around and have a good time. But you have your other people who are resellers, and they're going because they get discounts at all these stores.
Sure.
So they get like 75% discount.
Wow.
So it's a big discount. And so a lot of resellers will pay $70 to go on a bus trip so that they can get the discounts at all the thrift stores. But they're looking, there's one guy that all he collects is military memorabilia.
Right.
And another one collects fishing gear. And they're on a mission. So it's so interesting that, there's just so many types.
That's true. When I was actively dealing, I saw, in fact, my wife used to tease me about it. We'd go somewhere and I'd eye something and she'd raise her eyebrows and go, ooh, income opportunity. Because I saw everything through that lens,
Yeah.
I'd see, what am I going to pay for it? How am I going to market it? Who's going to buy it? That was all top of mind because I was in that groove. I was out looking for inventory, and that's what I was doing. But now I kind of like this phase of my life where I don't have to do that anymore. If I find something that's killer, I'm going to buy it because that's just what I do. But I like taking my time and examining something and looking, and appreciating the craftsmanship and that sort of thing. And, once I've done that, if I want to flip it, I'll flip it.
Yeah. But you've come a long way, Wayne. I mean, you know, thinking about auctioneering and repairing furniture and, going through all of the cycles of your life. And now it's like, okay, I want to buy it. I'm going to buy it.
Right.
And, I don't have to flip it. If I want to flip it, I will, but it's still just a little more relaxing, I think.
Well, quite a bit. And now the pressure's off. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't grow up to be a gazillionaire,
Yeah.
but I live comfortably. It's my wife and I. Our kids are grown and married and have their own families, and
Yeah.
they're self-supporting. I mean, it's a nice spot to be in.
Sure.
But by golly, I earned it.
That's it. The circle of life,
That's right.
and you earned it. That's it. I do have to tell you, I went into a Salvation Army and looking around, I needed to go to the restroom, but I was in a hurry and I thought, no, I'm just going to keep looking some more. And
That's
then
why
I
they make
just,
Depends.
so I spot this giant Coca-Cola bottles. They were about probably, I don't know, 24 inches tall.
Right.
And there were six of them. And they were in a big wooden box. And the box was marked some type of amusement company.
Mm-hmm.
And here it was like a ring toss game from a carnival.
Wow.
And it had the wooden rings laying on the bottles. And it was up very high on a shelf. And I thought, OMG, I've got to have that. Because I thought, and so I hurry up and looked it up online, and I thought $500 easy, because this was whatever amusement it had on it. And it was a rare type of item from an amusement park that was from the ring toss,
Right.
game. And it had the Coca-Cola brand all over it. And so looking around, can't find anybody to help me. And I was like, okay, I have to go to the restroom. So I went straight to the restroom. I hurry back, and as I'm coming back, here comes a lady pushing her cart with the Coca-Cola bottles in it. And I was like, no, no. And I didn't know how much they were either. And so I'm angry at myself, So I'm like, and I already had a cart full of clothing items. So I was like, okay, let me just leave. I'll get behind her. So I got behind her in the checkout line, and I'm just waiting. And she's looking at them, and she's looking at me. And I go, yeah, those are pretty cool. And I go, I'll be honest with you, I was actually wanting them, but I had to go to the restroom. And then she goes, oh, I'm sorry. And I thought, yeah, I'm sorry too. And I said, what are you going to do with them? And she said, oh, we're having a party this weekend, and I'm just going to have them out so that we're going to do for shots. We're going to toss the rings to have shots of tequila. And I was just like, oh. And so I wanted so bad. I mean, I just froze. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to say, well, here's my card. When you're done playing tequila shots, can you call me and I'll buy it from you? And I just didn't know how to handle it, because part of me wanted to say, do you know that's worth a lot of money? And part of me didn't want to tell her. And so I just kind of froze. And then she went to check out, and the clerk said, oh, where's the price tag on that? She said, oh, it's right here. It's $24.99. And I almost threw up.
Well,
So it's like, okay, wasn't meant to be. Think of the bad, because I already had it in my mind when I went to the restroom how I was going to ship it in like a giant Charmin toilet paper roll box. So I had it all figured out how I was going to list it and ship it. And I never dreamed that it would have been gone that fast. So
yeah.
snooze, you lose.
And it happens, and it happens. It has happened to all of us.
Yes, but there you have it. There's a very cool item found in a Salvation Army. So Wayne, as far as traveling goes, are you going to get to travel, or are you just going to be interviewing people, or both?
Well, I doubt that I'll be traveling. I probably won't be traveling for the publications I write for because what
Okay,
they pay for articles won't pay for the trip.
I see.
But if I'm already going somewhere, then I'll take advantage of it. Right now, I'm working with it's the Blue Ridge Travel Association in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. It comprises 5 or 6 counties. I'll be traveling regularly to little towns in the Blue Ridge and writing about them, blogging about them, that sort of thing. So for this summer, anyway, I'll be doing that, traveling up and down the 460 miles of the Blue Ridge Parkway and the little towns along the way, that kind of thing. So mind this summer, anyway, it's going to be mountain culture and that kind of thing. And I'll be putting those on the Antiques Tourism website as well.
That is going to be really fun. Now, your wife will go with you. You can
Oh, of
make a
course.
trip.
Of
Yeah.
course. I don't
That'll,
go anywhere without her.
aw, that'll be really a fun adventure.
Right. Yeah, it should
Yeah.
be. It should
Yeah.
be. And we've lived here for quite a while and hit most of the high spots, but there's so many places that we haven't been. Festivals and
Yeah.
wineries. We have a world-class cheesemaker right here in Galax. They win competitions in France, and it's a
Wow.
local mountain cheese company. So there's lots of cultural and heritage activities around here. This is the Galax, where I live, is deemed the world capital of old time mountain music. This was around before bluegrass, so it's the real classic stuff, and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. So,
Fun.
oh, and not to mention the moonshine capital of the world. A couple of
Really?
counties over in Franklin County, Virginia, written books and movies about that, and of
How
course
fun.
it might be more fun if I still enjoyed moonshine, but boy, that stuff will eat your stomach and your throat and everything along the way. So I don't mess with that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty toxic.
It makes tequila look like milk of magnesia.
There you go. Oh my goodness. Well, any final words, Wayne?
I think that antiques are relevant. I think they're fun, and traveling to embrace antiques as a part of cultural heritage tourism is really the best way to go because getting there is half the fun.
Perfect.